for joining us on the Red Team Village Mayhem Virtual Summit. Our speaker is Phil. He has been in this industry for a very long time and is an expert in pen testing. And I will let Phil take it away from here. Thank you, Phil.
Hi, thanks, Joseph, and thanks to you and Omar for hosting this. This has been a really great conference. I've been excited. Kind of tough to follow these guys that's been presenting today, but really great content. Thanks for everyone for attending and supporting this event. People supporting this events like this is what keeps it going. As long as people show up, it'll keep happening. Like they say, if you build it, they will come. So keep attending these, and I can see more of this happening in the future. So a little bit about me. I'm Phillip Wylie. I have my CISSP, OSCP, the GWAPT from SANS, and I'm the senior red team lead for a large global consumer product company. I'm the adjunct professor at Richland College. I teach ethical hacking and web application pen testing. I'm also the founder of the Pwn School Project, which is was like an on-site meetup, but we stream, and we've had to go strictly streaming for now, but we record our talks to YouTube. And most of our topics are usually around offensive security topics. We do have some blue team topics from time to time. Started out mainly going to be offensive related topics, but as we saw that there was a need for these other topics in security, then we kind of added those. I've been in IT and information security for over 22 years, been pen testing a little over 6 years. My first 5 years I spent as a consultant. I started out as a sysadmin, moved into network security, then AppSec, application security is what got me interested in pen testing from using the web app vulnerability scanners. I got exposed to that, got to go to some different talks and demos on software, and it really got me interested in penetration testing. And I'm also a co-host of the Uncommon Journey podcast. We talk to people throughout the industry about their journey into InfoSec. So my uncommon journey, and I like to share this because I had no idea that I would ever be using my mind for a living. So, some people can relate to this. And, whenever I graduated high school, I didn't have a plan. I was grown up and I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up. And my friends recommended being a pro wrestler. So that made sense to me because I was a power lifter and kind of a big guy. So I didn't have any plans and it sounded like fun. So I went to wrestling school and I wrestled for a few years. And then I got married, and then I needed more of a stable income and more of a lifestyle that's conducive to marriage. And so I worked various jobs doing manual labor, retail sales. And then I saw an ad one day on television for a trade school teaching CAD drafting. So I went to school, learned CAD drafting. Before that, my exposure to computers was just back in those days playing online games on Prodigy, the old internet service back before the internet really took off. And that was my experience. And as I worked as a CAD draftsman, I got exposure to computers and found out that I had more of a natural ability towards computers. That was more wherever I had my knack. And during that time, I found out about system administrator work. As a CAD draftsman, we were billed out at $30 an hour, and we were making about half of that. So we had a sysadmin come into our office one day, and they were billing $50 an hour. So I thought, this guy's making at least $10 an hour more than what I'm doing. What he's doing looks a lot more fun. So I taught myself how to build computers. And then after that, I took a Novell Network class to work towards my CNE certification. And prior to getting my certification, I got a job on a rollout of Windows 95 and NetWare 4.1.1. And so that's how I got my start. And after that, I moved into information security, started out network security, and then eventually pen testing. I like to share my story and then go back to look at my details of my technical career to show people the skills that I gained and knowledge that helped me become a penetration tester. And I like to share this slide with my students each semester. This talk actually evolved out of a talk I do first semester for my students about pen testing. And this is kind of went in, expanded to how to become a pen tester and the skills needed. So I like to share this slide each semester and remind my students only hack if you have permission, even better, written permission. Hacking without permission is illegal. So as they say in Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So this, like I said, this evolved out of a lecture for my class. And so what we're going to cover today is tell you what pen testing is, and the skills you need before you start learning how to pen test. You saw all these great talks today, all these people with these really good skills, really high level, really highly skilled individuals, but you got to start somewhere. And pen testing is a good way if you want to be a red teamer. It's just kind of a variation of the skills they do there. So we're going to discuss that day after this is over with. If you're not already in the offensive security space, you'll have a better idea how to get into it. So what is pen testing? Pen testing is assessing security from an adversarial's perspective, as a malicious hacker would look at a network the way they would hack into systems, trying to gain unauthorized access to systems and sensitive data, also known as hacking. Why pen testing? Security posture from an adversarial perspective gives you a better understanding of the risk, security, severity. Exploitable vulnerabilities are higher risk and a higher priority for remediation, as well as justifying the budget. Sometimes remediation can be expensive, and business, if they can't afford the new firewalls or this new technology, sometimes they file an exception. They don't do that, or they come up with some mitigating control. So pen tests are a way to justify the budget to improve security and to remediate some vulnerabilities that exist that are discovered during a pen test. Also, it's needed for regulatory compliance. PCI DSS, the payment card industry data security standard, is a big driving force in the banking industry. One of my first jobs outside of consulting was working for a bank, and the majority of our work was based on PCI. So there's a lot of stuff related to compliance, a lot of your privacy, your PII information that needs to be protected. This has made the requirement for pen testing to increase. It's a fun job and a lot of job opportunities. And back on the fun job bullet, even now, I've been doing this for a while. Every time I get a shell, get, administrator or root or domain administrator, there's still big thrill as it was the very first time. They're pen testing jobs. So when you're out here looking for jobs, you're looking through, your job descriptions, and that's one of the things I kind of go by to increase my skills. Look what people are looking for at certain jobs, and I know this is the type of scripting or programming language that would be helpful. These different other technologies. So as you're looking for this, it's not always listed as penetration tester or pen tester. It's more commonly like security consultants, analysts, or engineers. You have to dig into the job description to see that it's a pen testing job. And different terms synonymous with this, most people have heard of ethical hackers. It's usually an easier way to describe to non-technical individuals penetration testing. Offensive security and adversarial security or other terms used to describe. And these are things that you could see in the job description. And threat and vulnerability management teams are a lot of places where pen testers reside in a company. Pen testing skills in other areas. So there's other areas that pen testing is helpful for. I mean, if you don't, even if you're not wanting to be a pen tester, if you understand pen testing, then understanding these skills are helpful as a SOC analyst, be able to understand that malicious traffic and better identify the type of attacks going on. Digital forensics incident response is another great area to understand these attacks. Network security analysts and engineers, purple teams where the red team is working with the defensive team to help strengthen the controls, and application security. This is a big area because a lot of times between pen tests, their application security folks will be doing vulnerability assessments. And so just to kind of give you even more information on why these skills are important and why looking at it from an adversarial perspective is important, is look at the MITRE ATT&CK framework, how much it's mentioned in red teaming. And a lot of people are starting to look at this as defenders at the MITRE ATT&CK framework. So this goes to show that looking at security from that perspective is very important. And when you're doing a pen test, there's different type of targets. So more commonly, you're going to see network and application. Your network could be internal facing, external, and wireless, because not always attackers are external. And if someone got a foothold internally, then how are they able to traverse through the network? Wireless is a very risky security, very risky technology if it's not secured well, because an attacker could hack into your facility from outside of your building, even a mile or so down the road, with some of the high-powered equipment they have out there for the USB network cards, as well as the long-range antennas. Applications, another popular area with web app, thick client, mobile, and cloud applications need to be tested. And then hardware, your network hardware, your routers and switches, IoT, medical devices, including pacemakers and insulin pumps. These could be used to cause harm to someone. So not always is breaches geared towards or focused on monetary. It's also geared towards possibly harming people. With terrorism being a thing these days, we have to worry about. Then this is a way for them to cause harm without actually having to be in close proximity and easy to perform the attack and get away. Transportation is a very important area because you have your autonomous vehicles, you have the different navigation systems, planes. If someone is able to take control of this, they could cause a lot of harm. People and buildings through social engineering are targets that are tested. And a lot of times people will specialize in social engineering and building security as well as even the transportation. And types of pen test knowledge. Every time you're doing a pen test, you know so much about the target or you know little on the target. Your black box test is limited to no information on the target. I've done pen tests, full scope pen tests before, or red teaming engagements to where we knew the physical address because we had to test the physical address of a certain facility, and it was up to us to collect all the IP addresses and URLs. So black box is less information. The opposite end of the spectrum is white box or crystal box. This is detailed information, including accounts for application testing and documentation, even like some of the pen testing methods like assume breach get to be more of like a white box test. Someone may have a low-level user account on that system and see what they can do from there. And gray box is what we run into a lot of pen testing. This is partial knowledge, enough knowledge to be able to test the network. It's a combination or kind of a happy medium between the two different types. And a lot of these are going to be based on the amount of time for your pen test. If you've got a lot of time, then you can do a black box. If you get very little time, the more information you have, the better you can perform that test. And also this gives you information when you're doing your threat modeling. The more information you have, the better you can do a threat model to test the system and find those different layers and exploit endpoints on those devices or environments you're testing. And types of testing depth or different layers of a pen test. Your vulnerability scanning is like one of your first things. And a lot of companies will do recurring vulnerability scans like on a weekly or biweekly or monthly basis to find the low-hanging fruit to get those vulnerabilities remediated. And as you notice from the slide, I've got in red text, it's not a pen test. It's not a pen test. You're just looking for vulnerabilities. Vulnerability assessments is the next level. This is still not a pen test because you're not trying to exploit anything. During a vulnerability assessment, you're validating the findings. So if you find these vulnerabilities, you're validating those findings, making sure they're not false positives. And you'll also use other tools outside of your vulnerability scanners, like your port scanners like Nmap and MassScan, to look for ports and services that may be vulnerable that you could do some manual testing against. And vulnerability assessments and pen testing, it's not all about automation. Automation is an important part, but it's not the whole thing. You need to really use those manual techniques to help improve the quality of your pen test. And then your next level is your penetration test. So you've done your vulnerability scans, you've validated this during your vulnerability assessments, you've done your port scans and service scans to look at other vulnerabilities that you may have to detect manually or with other tools. Now you're to the exploitation phase. This is what makes it a pen test. You're exploiting the system or hacking into the system. And then kind of your next level of testing depth is more your full scope pen test, your red team and adversarial tests. There's a lot of confusion when it comes to red team. Sometimes people will, kind of broadly categorize all offensive security as red team, all defense as blue team. And even on a blue team perspective, there's more to it than that. But from red teaming and adversarial testing is more testing the blue team's ability to respond, testing without notification, making sure that the security controls, technology, and personnel you have in place are detecting and reacting to these attacks. So this is really truly what red teaming is. And if you've been on the conference most of the day, you probably gathered that by now. But this is where it gets into one of the more interesting areas, in my opinion. They all have their place, but with a lot of the compliance has really narrowed the scope down. And so this is where the red teaming really comes into play. And different specializations, and this goes back based on our targets. You have your generalists, and this is usually where people start out, unless you have an application background. So doing your network, your Wi-Fi, and light web app. Even though you're doing a network pen test, there are a lot of different tools out there to administer systems that have a web front end. So having a knowledge of that is important. And then your application, this is web app, mobile, thick client, and cloud. So these are some of the specializations. And usually your generalists are people that come out of a security background or system administrators. Your application security can come from people that have pen testing experience or someone that has that development background. This is a really, software development, web development is a really good area for people who want to be application pen testers. And then social engineering and physical, these kind of follow each other, and they actually kind of go hand in hand with red team. These are used a lot more during red team engagements or full scope penetration tests. And then there's also people that do transportation. And people I've seen get in this field have been mechanics, people that work for car manufacturers that deal with the electronics, the computer system that control the cars. They understand the technology. Now it's just a matter of learning how to hack it. Then your red team and adversarial simulations. And how to become a pen tester. This is usually the more interesting part of this talk to people, most of the reason why most people attend this talk. So to become a pen tester, you've got to understand the technology. You've got to understand networking and operating systems, especially Windows and Linux. And you need to know those operating systems at a system administrator level, because you get access to a Windows box or Linux server through the command line. If you don't know the command line, then you're going to be doing a lot of Googling, you're going to be lost. So you really need to understand this. Knowing the operating system, you can shut down firewalls and different services, antivirus and that kind of thing. So understanding that command line is very important. And then understanding security. So you need to understand the technology of the target you're trying to hack, and then you need to understand the security, how to get around those security controls. And then application and hardware are good areas to understand as well. And so once you've got that technology piece of it and the security piece, then you've got to learn how to hack. And this was where I was at in my career. I'd worked in security. I'd worked as a sysadmin. I did some web application security stuff, done some vulnerability scans, but I didn't know how to hack. I got hired on as a penetration tester, and a new part of being a pen tester is how to hack and exploit systems. So I signed up for the Offensive Security OSCP certification, and this is where I learned how to hack, which was one of the most valuable courses that I've taken to date. I've learned a lot in that course. So you have to learn how to hack. So through classes like the OSCP, classes at conferences, different talks at conferences like this, meetups and meetings, your different local DEF CON groups, your OWASP groups, your hacker associations, and then self-study. Even though you're getting training and stuff, you need to practice. So having a home lab is good. There's a lot of good walkthroughs and tutorials on YouTube. So videos are a great resource. Tutorials, blogs, and articles on Twitter. InfoSec Twitter is a really good place to get information, because all the people that are writing these really cool tools like Mimikatz and PowerShell Empire and all these really cool tools, they usually have Twitter accounts, and they post out about findings that they found in different tools they wrote. So this is a really good place to find information and get plugged into the security community. And once you kind of gained some knowledge, you're going to have to develop the hacker mindset. And the hacker mindset is the ability to think like a malicious hacker. You have to find ways to exploit the vulnerabilities. This is one area of security, not the only one that requires creativity, but it's one area that requires creative and analytical thinking combined. And to develop this mindset is similar to troubleshooting. When you install something and it goes perfect, that's fine. But then when it breaks, you have to figure out how to troubleshoot and fix it. Or if you're installing something and it doesn't install well from the beginning, you understand that technology better, that you've had to go through and troubleshoot, and some of the caveats. So hacking is kind of the same way. You'll find certain conditions and you realize, like troubleshooting, you have to do this to fix it. Then you realize, if I see this vulnerability, this is possible and this is possible. Learn how to chain together those different types of exploits and techniques. That's how you develop that mindset. And this takes time and repetition. So working in your lab, working as CTFs and bug bounties is a good way to get the practice. So the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And once you build up that base level of knowledge, you're able to build off of that. So this is very, very important to develop the hacker mindset. And the pen tester blueprint formula. So as we discussed, you need the technology knowledge, security knowledge, and plus the hacker mindset. And where do you start? So what you need to do here next is you need to assess your skills, and then you do a gap analysis on what you know and what you need to know to become a pen tester. As we discussed, you need to know operating systems, hardware and networking, and security. So based on that, you need to decide what you need to learn. If you got no IT experience, then you need to start with the basics. Learn operating systems, hardware, and networking, and be patient in your journey to learn this. If you get in too big of a hurry, you don't retain it, and you miss and skip some things. So the more time you take to learn, the more time you spend, the better you're going to understand this, and the better you're going to be at anything you're doing. And there's nothing worse than flying through something and then you're on a project and now all of a sudden you've got to relearn something that you started learning at one time. So try to remember, make an effort to learn. The end goal may be to be a pen tester or a red teamer, but you really need to make sure that you have all that foundational knowledge there. And if you have IT experience, then fill in the areas that you don't have experience with. If you don't know Linux, there's a lot of areas in IT that you may not be using Linux on a daily basis. You may not understand security or networking and learn those. It's going to pay off in the end. And some of these things you hear people say, they'll see this and they'll think I don't have to have that. But some of the people are saying that are coming from a educational background. They've been going to college. So, if you're going to college, you're learning networking, you're learning operating systems, you're learning these technologies in security and development, you're learning something. This is a base. So this is part of this. There's different ways to acquire this knowledge. And then InfoSec experience, you could be working in compliance and not really doing much from a hands-on technical point of view. So you need to fill in those gaps as well. And if you have that experience, then you got to learn to hack and working in CTFs, bug bounties, and different type of events like that. It's a good way to build that experience. And as you go through your vulnerable labs at home and these things, you can explain to an employer how you would do reconnaissance against a target, how you would exploit that system, how you do your enumeration. So as you're doing these steps, you're learning valuable skills and things that you can explain on an interview. And anyone, no matter what level you're at, build a lab. I've been in IT and security over 22 years, and I still have a lab. I've got a dedicated server with vulnerable VMs on it, as well as I run some vulnerable VMs on my laptop as well to be able to practice. And it's also a good way, if you're experienced, to test your proof of concepts. Sometimes you find an exploit and you want to test it in a test environment before you put it on a network. Because sometimes it can have adverse impacts on the network. If you crash a system, that's not good. And so you can kind of refine your attack before you get it on that production environment. So it's very important to test that. And then your labs. This is pretty broad, and you can get more granular, but the very first lab, like I was mentioning, my laptop with VMs, this would be what I refer to as the minimalist lab. You've got your attack VM on there, or your host that you're running on a system could have your hacking tools on there. And then you've got your vulnerable VMs on there that you're attacking. And then you get your dedicated labs. You can have multiple systems, like a standalone server with your vulnerable VMs on it, or you can have, the operating system running vulnerable applications on it. And then your advanced labs, you can break it down and get as complex if you want. You can get a server rack, you can get servers, set up your clients, you can use routers and switches, and a lot of stuff you can still virtualize. Things to keep in perspective when you're building these labs out. The more complicated you make it, then if you're trying to learn to hack and you're spending most of your time troubleshooting, then that can kind of slow you down. Back in my process coming up through IT and security, I used to do web design on the side, and I hosted my client sites at home on a Apache web server that I had running on Linux. And whenever I had hardware failures, I had to come back home and reinstall. So it was taken away from where I was making money, where I needed my focus at. So keep that in mind. Although if you really need to learn the troubleshooting experience, this could be a good way. But if you really need to, if you're at the point in your career, you need to really focus on the hacking perspective of it, then focus on that and set something up solid that you're not having to troubleshoot, something that's easy for you to maintain. And another advantage to the minimalist lab is you can take this with you. So if you're traveling for work, if you want to go to the coffee shop or something, you're at home, you get tired of studying one place, you can go to the library any place. So it's portable, so you can take your lab with you. Plus, on your minimalist lab, you can have this set up for doing your bug bounties and also CTF, so you have all your tools on there. In your home lab, how to set up your attack platform. So you need something to attack your systems from. You need something to install your hacker tools on. Kali Linux is a very popular one, as well as Parrot OS. I like Kali Linux because it's been around longer. It's maintained and created by pen testers for pen testers, and also the creators of the offensive security courses such as the OSCP. So it's a good solid platform to test from. Although there's nothing wrong with Parrot OS, the one thing I say is it's pretty easy to install any of the hacking tools on Linux, on Kali Linux. You hardly run into very many snags installing stuff. And then if you just want to run, if you like Ubuntu Linux, then you can use Trusted Sec's Pentester framework. With the Pentester framework, you have this little script, this little program that you run, and you can install the different hacking tools. And I was seeing earlier today that you can actually even install some C2 from that. Before, it was more related to your typical pen testing tools like Metasploit, which is often considered a C2, but some of the more dedicated C2 installs are in there. So that's a good route to go. And then also Windows 10 with Commando VM. FireEye has a set of scripts similar to kind of like the Pentester framework that you run these different scripts and it will install the different pen testing tools. And I'd recommend being able to use a Windows and a Linux platform because there's a lot of administrative tools on Windows for administering Microsoft databases and networks, Active Directory that run really well on Windows. So that's a good platform to have. I would recommend having two different VMs or two different total systems, one with Linux and one with Windows. And to set up your targets at home, you can create different VMs from vulnhub.com, which is a good resource. And two of the first VMs I'd recommend is Metasploitable 2 and 3. Metasploitable 2 takes a little less setup. Metasploitable 3 is a little more scripted because you can install it on Windows. So that's one of the nice things. A lot of the vulnerable VMs come on Linux. You definitely need to get experience with Windows because a lot of your enterprise environments are going to be, the majority of their systems are going to be Windows. They're running Active Directory. They're running, Exchange and Outlook for their email. So understanding those Microsoft technologies and how to hack those are going to be very important in your career. OWASP WebGoat, as well as a lot of other vulnerable apps out there. And just like Websploit, Omar's project, that's another great one that has vulnerable Dockerized vulnerable apps that you have these targets to test against. And also you can create your own VM targets with vulnerable software from ExploitDB. Not only does ExploitDB have the exploits, a lot of times there's links to the vulnerable applications. So if you want to test a certain exploit from a proof of concept that you're doing a pen test, or you're just trying to learn different attacks, you can download the software and install it and set up your own virtual environment. And if you're wanting to build CTFs, that's a good place to get vulnerable apps for your targets for your CTFs. And recommended reading, this first book here, Penetration Testing, a Hands-On Introduction to Hacking by Georgia Weidman. This is a really good book. I used to use this for my web app, not my web app pen testing class, but for my ethical hacking class. When I started out with the class, we used this book the first year. And what's really great about this book, not only is it teaching you pen testing, it's also teaching you how to build your own lab environment. And Georgia not only is a pen tester and a researcher, a very talented individual, she's also an OSCP. So this would have been very handy if this book would have been out when I was going through my OSCP. So this is the book I recommend starting out with, especially considering it shows you how to build your own labs. And then you have the Hacker's Playbook 2 and 3. There's a version 1, but version 2 is a little more modern version, updated version of the book. And I would start with that. And then version 3, I wouldn't skip version 2. Version 3 gets more into red teaming. So there's more red team techniques in there. Version 2 is more Pentester focused, but the books build off each other. This is the order I would do those books in. And if you're wanting to be a web app Pentester, then the Web Application Hacker's Handbook, Discovering and Exploiting Security Flaws, you want to make sure to get version 2 of that book. And this book is created by one of the creators of Burp Suite. And also along the lines of that, they have a really great resource now. They quit updating the book, but if you go to portswigger.net, the Web Application Security Academy on there has, instead of updating the book, they started putting all the content online. So they've got a lot of labs that they're constantly adding to, everything from beginner level to very advanced. So this is a really good place to learn web app pen testing along with this book. And this is the book I've been using for my web app pen testing course at Richland College. And the Red Team Field Manual, this is a good one. That's just a good resource manual of different tips and tricks, different one-liners and syntax for Cisco and Linux, Unix, and Windows commands. So this is a nice little lightweight resource that can help you find things that you may need during a pen test or during other IT and security needs. And then here's a list of resources. If you kind of notice, there's kind of a gap between the bottom and the top. And the reason for that is the top resources are paid resources. These are not free. So SANS Institute, they've got some of the best in the industry, just like George that we heard earlier today. And these people are in the field, some of the best, and they're writing the course content. So these are really good classes. Some cases, you're going to have to go through your employer to afford these because they're like $7,000 courses, although they've added a couple courses like the Red Team course by George. That one is a 2-day class, and it's like $2,800. And then your next level down is eLearn Security. Their courses run you anywhere from $1,000 to like $1,900, and they had some corporate special going recently that you can get all of their courses for a year for like a little under $4,000. And then you got virtual hacking labs and all these, the SANS and eLearn Security, that you can learn mobile web app pen testing, network pen testing. And so those are really good resources. And virtual hacking labs, if you're wanting to go through the OSCP, this is a good way to kind of do some upfront studying. If you don't have experience in pen testing, it's good to prepare a little bit upfront for the OSCP. Just going into it without any experience is going to make it a little more difficult. So virtual hacking labs, you can get like a full year subscription for $750, and you access the labs through a VPN. There's an online course on pen testing and a downloadable PDF that you can study on pen testing. And then you have these targets. And the cool thing about their setup is they start out from easy to advanced. The easy targets will tell you the operating system, and they'll give you some hints. And it helps you to exploit that system. As it gets more difficult, you start getting less tips up to no tips. So where they're getting to the point where you get towards the end, they take off the training wheels. It's up for you to attack these on your own. So they kind of build you up to it. And that's a good way to start out. And they even have like an Android device in their environment. So you get a little bit of variety outside of Windows and Linux. And then Pentester Academy, this is a really good one. They've got all sorts of stuff. This is very cost effective. They've got a deal going on now, $39 a month. And they've got online labs, like over 1,500 labs and growing. They've got different video courses on PowerShell for pen testers, JavaScript for pen testers, network pen testing, Metasploit, anything you can think of. This is a really good resource. And then you have Pentester Lab. If you're interested in web app pen testing, this is a good one. This one will take you from, exploiting a system to getting a shell. So a lot of the other resources on learning web app pen testing doesn't always take you to the shell. But if there's any way to get command line access, then these labs will show you how to do it. So it's really good if you're wanting to get more into the hardcore web app pen testing. And then Practical Pen Test Labs. Last time I saw, they were running $64 for lifetime access, VPN access to some vulnerable machines, and they have a little pen testing course that you go through starting out. So this is a really good resource, $64 for several virtual machines with vulnerabilities on it, different targets to hack. So that's a really good resource. And then we get to these other resources down here, Bugcrowd University and Hacker 101 through HackerOne. These teach you how to do web app pen testing. They show you about the different vulnerabilities, how to use different tools. And the Hacker One-on-One even has an online CTF. So you actually apply what you're learning to build up those skills to help phase you into becoming a web app pen tester or a bug bounty hunter. And then SANS pen testing blog, although a lot of SANS stuff is paid, they do have a lot of free content. And the pen testing blog is a really good place to learn Nmap. They've got some really good cheat sheets on Nmap and Metasploit, PowerShell, and some other tools. And then hackingtutorials.org. This was created by the creators of Virtual Hacking Labs. This is different tutorials based on vulnerability scanners, Metasploit, Nmap, different hacking tools. They show you how to use those. So that's a good way to get up to speed on some of those tools and techniques. And then Cybrary. Cybrary has a lot of good resources. They've started offering some paid content, but the Advanced Pen Testing course is based on the book by Georgia Weidman. She actually created the content. So it gives you some videos that you can go along with that book if you go that route of learning through Georgia's book. And Web Application Security Academy, as I mentioned, we're talking about the Web Application Hackers Handbook. That's the online lab for Portswigger, for the Burp Suite tool. And some of these require the pro version of Burp, but a lot of them don't. But the course content, the learning, you can go through there and read that regardless. But it starts out as a beginner level all the way up to advanced. And then OWASP.org has a lot of good information, links to online vulnerable applications, VMs that you can download, different vulnerable applications that you can practice web app pen testing through, as well as OWASP Zap, which is a competitor to Burp Suite. So they have other tools on there as well. So that's a really good resource. They've got the OWASP testing guide, which is a really good way to learn web app pen testing. It gives you a step-by-step methodology on how to perform web app pen tests, as well as they've included stuff on mobile and IoT on there, I believe. And then you got hackthebox.eu. So if you're wanting to go for the OSCP, they've got some boxes out there that are similar to some of the systems in the OSCP. And TJ Null has a really good resource out there where he compares systems that are similar to OSCP boxes, and some of those are even more difficult. So that's a really good resource to check out. And then Over the Wire, CTF, and also neglected to put Under the Wire, but both of those are really good. Over the Wire is Linux based, and Under the Wire is based on Windows and PowerShell. And to get these links, if you don't want to take a screenshot, you can also go to the hackermaker.com learning-resources, and I have all these links up there. And certifications. One of the things I want to say before we get into the certification portion of this, because over the years giving this talk, people always ask about the certifications. And one of the things I want to make sure to elaborate on, you can have any of these certifications, but I advise when you're going through this process, learn it. Don't just pass the exam, because if you have the exam, the certification, you go interview for a job, then it's not going to help. It may get your resume in the hands of a hiring manager, but that may be as far as you go. So you really need to know the content. Take the time learning that. So that's really important there. And entry-level certs, the CEH is a good one to get past the HR firewall. As far as what you learn, it's not what I recommend the most, but it's a DoD listed cert like the CISSP. A lot of government contractors will look for people to be able to get these government contracts, people that work for the government. They look for the CEH. There's some other ones out there. Pentest Plus hasn't made that list yet, but there's some other CompTIA certs, which I would imagine Pentest Plus will eventually get on there. But your intermediate certifications, these are the ones that are going to give you the knowledge to get through a technical interview. This is going to give you the skills you need. And these two are two of the most common certs I see when they're looking for pen testers, along with the SANS Web App Pen Testing cert. But the GPen from SANS is question based. You'll answer questions, and some of them could be just multiple choice, and some of them could be you're looking at this Nmap output, and you're supposed to describe what you see there and answer questions based on that. But the OSCP is lab, so you have to go in and hack into systems, write a report on it to be able to pass the exam. So you're actually getting hands-on, and you're proving what you learned, aside from just memorizing questions. And then your advanced cert, you're getting your GXPN and your OSCP. These are advanced certifications, advanced pen testing, and exploit development certs. The SANS is their typical format, which is question, answer, and performance questions based on the screens you see. But the OSCE is that's like a 48-hour exam that you actually have to write exploits and that sort of thing, and exploit systems to pass those. The interesting thing is a lot of the pen tests job requirements out there, a lot of times they equally consider those. And a lot of that's because the content of the SANS materials are really up to date and really good information. So, make sure to know what you're doing with the certificate, make sure you know the content, then also understand how these are going to help you out. The CEH gets your foot in the door. The intermediate and advanced certifications are going to go a lot further in helping you get the job. And different job tips, professional networking. So your different meetups, your conferences, always get out there and be networking. Your different meetups. LinkedIn is a good place to make sure this is your online resume. Keep it accurate and constantly up to date. This is the way recruiters are going to find you. They're looking for certain keywords, and this is how they're going to find your resume. And and also make sure you're putting things on there truthful. When you're going through an interview, you want to make sure that the things you have on your resume is truthful. You didn't, if you ran turning on Metasploit, launching Metasploit is not the same thing as knowing Metasploit. And then, on certain things, if you don't know them as in depth, kind of let the person that's interviewing you, give your experience on it. If you're not really advanced in your knowledge in it, explain how much experience you have with it. Because sometimes employers may see that you have a little bit of this experience and realize that they can build on that and train you for the job. So be honest on your resume. Make sure what you put on there is true, because interviewers will look at your resume. That's how they know what to ask you questions. If you're wondering why you're getting drilled on Metasploit, if you look like a Metasploit guru on your resume, they're trying to get an idea of how well you know the different skills and technologies that you have on your resume. Prepare for your interviews. Know the OWASP top 10. No matter what kind of pen testing job it is, you're always going to get asked questions on SQL injection, cross-site scripting, those different OWASP top 10 vulnerabilities. Make sure you understand the vulnerability, describe it, how it can be exploited, how it can be remediated. And, a lot of times I've been on interviews where people on my team were impressed because the person didn't know it was reflected or stored cross-site scripting, but they were able to distinguish the different types and know exactly what it was, didn't know the exact name of it. And then be able to explain the basics like the three-way TCP handshake and the OSI model. Some people have been removed from pen testing and the hands-on for a while. This is kind of stuff that they still, deal with and understand. So this is the kind of stuff you may get asked there. So kind of understand before you go into an interview, just kind of review your resume, make sure you can explain your history, your work history, and then just kind of explain, be ready to explain, the different things on your resume, and that way you'll have a lot better job, a lot better opportunity during your interview and a higher chance of getting hired. I mean, the interviews I do best on are the ones that I review beforehand, and I'll still do that because you can get an interview, and if you hadn't looked at something in 6 months, you may forget certain details about it. So that's always something good to do. And here's my contact information. I got into teaching because I loved sharing my passion for pen testing and ethical hacking. I would meet people at different meetups. They'd be interested in the OSCP, and they would ask me different, educational tips, things to learn that, and as well to become a pen tester. So I've helped and mentored a lot of people over the years. This is what got me into teaching and starting the Pwn School project. And so you can find me on Twitter. I'm pretty active there. You can find the Pwn School project at pwnschool.com. We have different recordings from different meetups. So we've had Tim Medine do talks for us, although we don't have the recording from that. So feel free to join us. We got meetings coming up next week. I teach web app pen testing, ethical hacking at Richland College. The courses are available online. And check out ITSP Magazine for the Uncommon Journey podcast. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to take those now, or you can follow up with me on Discord or through social media.
Excellent. Thank you, Philip. And basically, yeah, right now, basically, it's just only through Discord. So if you have any questions, I see that Discord is actually extremely active. And if you just join us,
Okay.
we have a Discord channel specifically for the Red Team Village.
Sure.
Feel free to communicate with any of the speakers. And thank you again.
Thanks for hosting me. Thanks.
Absolutely.